Thank you. I'm Helen James from ANU. My question is to Dr. Ponkisu. I wonder if you could possibly tease out for us, please, whether you think there's any difference between the official political constructivist model of Thai-Sino relations and any distinctions you might find between that and the socio-cultural, socio-political reality on the ground within Thai society. Throughout Thai history, there's been quite a number of massacres of Chinese. There's been quite a strong legal code against the Chinese community from various aspects, particularly with regard, for example, to arson, insurance fires, the drug trade, etc., etc. For example, even as late as the Sarit regime, and in fact later than that, throughout the 70s, Chinese people involved in the drug trade were subject to summary execution, and so on and so forth. There was a distinction, I perceived, between very, very wealthy Chinese, such as the Lump Sum family, who were involved in banking and in fact had a lot of business dealings with the court and so on, and what you might call Chinese people and families much lower down the socio-economic order. And I think that continues till today, so that in Thai society on the ground, there's a very, very different model from what you're projecting. And in fact, distinctions are made between various socio-economic levels amongst the Chinese community in Thailand in terms of their access to state resources. So I'm just wondering if you'd like to comment on that, please.
Just one at a time. Thank you very much for your questions. Yeah, I understand that as Ajahn Thongchai was mentioning yesterday sometimes too, that actually identities, like in the society we have different multiple identities, right? And my focus now is at the elite identity and how the elites trying to socialize these kind of perceptions of themselves and the Chinese as a major narrative, as a socialization tool to the whole society, as a representation of what Thailand is supposed to view the Chinese. Of course, on the ground there are multiple differences. The different groups suffer from state maltreatment during the history, and there a lot of family. I'm aware that a lot of Chinese family have that kind of grievances, to the Thai state, and of course the Thai perception toward the Chinese is not like as smooth as I'm mentioning about what the elite would think. For example, at this current time, like this present, a lot of influx of Chinese tourists into Thailand, and their behavior were not like very well welcomed by the Thai, because unproperness, they urinated in different places, and you have to clean up, and some Thai temple has to close down and stop the Chinese to come in. So of course there are a lot of change and development at this current time, as well as in the past history. I don't deny that. I agree with you that there are a lot of perceptions among different groups, but this focus is basically the Thai state or Thai elite that trying to construct this perception and image to cement their relationship with China, of course, for its own sake, their own benefit. Yes.
Thank you. My name is Miles Cooper. Thank you, Dr. Ponkisu, for what I found a fascinating presentation. But I would like to explore some of the implications of this phrase, Pinogan.
Yes.
because I think just using brothers in English doesn't quite
yeah,
give the full sense of it. And is it implicit in your view, in this context, that China is the peer and Thailand is the norm? And if so, how does that correlate with international law, under which all states are equal? And if so, is Thailand deliberately or unconsciously putting itself in the inferior position, and does that just encourage China in its ambitions to be the regional hegemon?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the questions. I actually mentioned briefly about this toward the end of my presentation, that this kind of perception or this kind of identity or image kind of shape the normative environment in which the policy makers actually think about themselves in China and how the policy response to the Chinese is supposed to be. So actually, I think you're right that by thinking about P Nong, like you are P, I'm Nong, so have to be. It fits with the pre-existing norm in Thailand as well, or in China, it's a เกรงใจ concept, or in Chinese it's 客气, like so you feel 客气, you don't want to bother the brother or the other people to like too much, and this is evidence, in the negotiation of the high-speed train with the Chinese. When after the coup, the junta government negotiated so that the Chinese would invest in the high-speed train in Thailand from northeast, from Laos through Bangkok, and the Chinese offered a very high interest rate of the loan, like 4% if I remember correctly, and then everybody was just like, what? We are supposed to be พี่น้องกัน why this interest rate is so like. You don't see us as a พี่น้อง, right? So like a lot of people in the media start to question. On Facebook, you can see like, see, Kunta, you're just like stupid, You are trying to use this, but you actually, this picture kind of showed that the Thai elite think that the Chinese are, the Chinese is the brother, and older brother, and we should kind of comply, whatever it is. We don't have to request so much. And that's why I'm saying that this kind of influence the policy, has a policy implication in the longer term. And as you can see, a lot of IR scholars was trying to analyze what the Southeast Asian position toward China and United States at this time, current time. And obviously the Thai has a tendency to bandwagon or, side with the threat. So see this is a threat insecurity term, but then when you bandwagon with a threat, you are safe. Instead of like, jumping into another, deepening the alliance with the United States. And you obviously see that, alliance between Thailand and the United States kind of experienced very tough times during the post-Cold War period because of less mutual benefit, like not tangible benefit enough. So I think that it really influenced the way in which the Thai would like to maintain a smooth relation with Beijing instead of quarreling with the Chinese. And you can see that the Thai leaders easily criticize. It's easier for the Thai leader to criticize the U.S. leader whenever the U.S. has a very tough policy. Everybody come, oh, you're a friend, you're betray friend. You're a friend, you should just treat us nicely, but then you're not. So I think this is implication to the whole regional order at this time. Thank you.
Can I add something quickly? Just one sentence, 2 sentences. I did my master's thesis on Chinese foreign policy, so I have some insight into this. Some scholars in international relations, they don't, especially in the area experts, they argue that regional order is not really about anarchy. It's about international hierarchy. Especially David Kang, he argues that we are returning to the xenocentric regional order, and then Peacock mentions that there is the family perception here, and then it got me thinking to the Confucius ideas that exist in China for thousands of years, and those five cardinal relationships are not really equal relationships. It's based on hierarchies. So that's my insight to the topic quickly.
Just on this idea of very subjective thing of using family relationships to describe diplomatic relationships, I'm wondering whether, and diplomats will do this, and politicians will always wrap these things up at least one level more than reality warrants. And I'm wondering whether, in that regard, it would be better to, easier to understand the relationship between Thailand and China as cousins rather than as brothers. It's a different sort of relationship. And also, if we're going to continue to try to understand these relationships in familial terms, it's easier to get along with members of your family, whether they're your children, your parents, your brothers, or your cousins, if they don't live next door. But they live close by. And the extent to which the fact that Thailand doesn't share either a land or maritime border with China actually makes it easier to sort of talk about the relationship in these familiar terms too.
Thank you. So, would you like to respond to that?
I agree with you. Yeah. Well, probably that's part of the. I don't disagree with these factors that actually proximity actually matters as well. Yeah. So I think it's quite interesting if Thailand moves closer to China. But actually, it's not as well. We don't have conflict in terms of structural elements. We don't have conflict, territorial conflict, so it's easy to just like play nicely with it. But then it's not always that. As I mentioned, in the case of Singapore, if you can compare, they have like majority Chinese population. Even like in terms of racial relations, probably you can link more with China. So the Singapore trying to, at least at a elite level, trying to distance not using the term. So I agree that part of this is structural, not only normative or environment.
Yeah, so I just want to ask, are you willing to not having the break? So we can go on for a couple more questions?
Go ahead.
No, please. So I'm gonna after Zhang Tongchai, I'm gonna one more question and then we can take a break. Sorry about that.
Okay, Len, I'd like to make comment, not a question, so I won't allow you to answer. First, I think Helen's kind of comments on you is fair, because you yourself, when you present, you don't talk just about IR, but IR informed by social relations and social issues between Thai and Chinese. And those social issues that you mentioned are not just the elite. Many of them are about common people. So let's say, I think that criticism is fair. It means that if you want to bring those elements in, you have to sort it out, or at least explain. Then I have a good suggestion, not from mine, but Siddhi work. He worked, he's teaching now in Chiang Mai. His master's thesis on the suppression of the last Chinese riot in 1974. His idea to simplify it, he said he has to simplify it. The Thai state has dealt with the Chinese at least in two categories. One to good Chinese, the other one to bad Chinese. And the good and the bad doesn't always correlate with the class, but pretty much. Most of the measures against the Chinese are targeting at the bad Chinese, because the good Chinese are normally fine beyond that realm of suppression or all kind of restriction already. That's interesting. I don't know how it works. Another thing, to talk about good Chinese or to talk about the elite, just a piece of information. Do you recognize that the name of all, the Chinese name of all the Chakri king is a surname Tai? Start from Taiwan, right? It's all Taiwan. Because King Taksin has legitimate reason. Ayutthaya king never called himself with a Chinese name. Even though they want to be tributary, want to be a client, want to be in the low hierarchy, according to Thai idea or according to Chinese idea, it seems to be compatible, but not the same. It's compatible, hierarchical, concentric circle anyways. But Ayutthaya never tried to pretend that they are Chinese king. Taksin never tried to pretend that he is not Chinese king, because he was. Right? But then he proposed Chinese recognition, partly long story in that, which Thai history doesn't want to say. His success against the Burmese, partly with the help of Lord of Ha Tien, which is Chinese, Hokkien Chinese, helping the Teochew Chinese. The fleet he got in a short time, how he get a fleet? He get a fleet from Ha Tien. So after that, the emperor, the governor of Ha Tien wants to be the king of Siam, wants to be claimed to be the elder brother of the Daewang of Taksin. Taksin wants to resist that. The way to go, he went straight to emperor of China to recognize him. Then the governor of Ha Tien protests, doesn't want the Chinese to recognize. It takes 15 years of investigation. Then the Chinese emperor approved the king of Bangkok as a barbaric, as a Daewang, as a tributary king. By that time, the Chinese king sent the order down. King Taksin already dead. And who hijacked that? That's why all kings of Chakri dynasty have the last name, has a surname as Tai, because they claim to be the continuation of Taksin.
Yes, I mentioned on that slide before. I think like during the King Taksin, I think I found some of the historical book. The King Taksin actually was not called by the Chinese imperial court as, because in Chinese the word Wang.
Yeah.
Ong.
Is he Wang?
They don't call King Taksin Ong yet at that time. They call something lower than Ong.
Yep.
And then not until King Rama I.
That's right. Not until after 15 years after investigation, finally approved.
They start to recognize the Chinese state. Okay. Call them Ong. And I think like the picture of the picture of the king in the Chinese costume. It's not the imperial costume. It's the lower rank. To be exact. I'm not sure, like, people try to analyze like part of the decoration and ornament and the costume and the way it's dressed. It's not on par of the imperial court of China. So that shows something.
Thank you very much. There's a couple more people to ask, but we're really ran out of time. I'm so sorry. So thank you very much for voting. It was great. So please give a round of applause.